Hey everyone, Brent Wessler with Automation in Action podcast. Today I have the pleasure of Director of Professional Services at Encodian and Microsoft MVP, Aaron Rendell. Thanks for joining the podcast today, Aaron.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for inviting me. Great to be here.
Yeah, I've kind of wanted to talk with you, one because of our transition from traditional ISV and ECM to more of the Microsoft ecosystem and Power Platform and SharePoint and modern work platforms. And I'm excited to talk to you today because I do a lot of blogging on Azure AI Document Intelligence, which is kind of built into the Power Automate framework, and clearly Encodian's killing it within the Microsoft sphere as it relates to consulting services around that tech stack. So wanted just to kind of talk with you a little bit about how Encodian got started. What are you seeing in terms of projects? Some thought leadership around the Microsoft tech stack. So wanted to see from an Encodian standpoint, like how did you guys at least initially identify a gap niche to actually start Encodian?
Yeah, so I mean, Encodian as a business has been running for just over 8 years. Founded by Jay and James, who, I mean, at the time of founding the company, probably had 15 plus years of experience inside the Microsoft world, document management focused, records management specialists. Um, went their ways 8 years ago, formed Encodian, and initially for the first couple of years, very much focused on professional services, records management, working primarily with the healthcare organizations where, naturally there's lots of paper to be scanned and automated and ingested into records management system. And obviously SharePoint back then wasn't as good or as functional as it is these days.
It still has a lot of holes though, but clearly worse than it is today, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at the old versions of SharePoint, it's very, very dated. It's come a long way. The new modern SharePoint UI is it's a step in the right direction.
So there was no filer, you didn't productize anything, everything was primarily bespoke professional services.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the beginning of one of our products, Filer, which sits on top of SharePoint. I mean, we've still got some customers using Filer on premise, going through the motions at the moment of migrating to the cloud. So yeah,
I didn't know you could even
around.
run Filer on premise.
There is a version. Yeah. And
As
it's
a
obviously gone
professional
through
services director,
evolutions.
you want nothing to do with that, I assume.
No, we don't really support it anymore. Obviously, I
Okay.
mean, one of the key reasons there is, on-premise SharePoint developer skills is, almost a thing of the past.
Right.
Everyone that's coming through the door now interviewing is, Azure developers, SharePoint Online developers, SPFX framework. The legacy is quite niche and, typically only found, I suppose, in the older generation of consultants and developers, really. So yeah, and naturally we want to be moving away to online, moving away from the on-premise, which ironically, after about 2 years of the company being found, Power Platform came around. I think it was 2018. I think it was
It
6 years or
very
so ago.
limited, right? I mean, when that came out, it was very limited, right?
Yeah, and I mean that's really where I think Encodian then, skyrocketed because Power Automate or Flow, as it was called then, came about, and there was a gap in the market where the out-of-the-box workflow engines and SharePoint Designer just didn't have the functionality to manage documents. So, with Filer, records management hats on, document manipulation is just not something that was doable back then, and there was a gap. They took advantage of that gap. Power Platform at the time was very new. Microsoft, very similar to how the whole marketing of AI is at the moment and Copilot. Everyone's talking about it. There's, from an ISV perspective, lots of funding, lots of support. And at the time, there were offers for ISVs to start building connectors. And I think that's really when they took advantage. They started building it out. And it sort of just went from there, really. And it's quite a
Yeah, I always
nice
saw
self-serve model
InfoPath.
as well.
I always thought, why would they get rid of InfoPath? And they clearly had a vision for the Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate, but they took a while in between. Um, I don't know when they sunsetted InfoPath, but it seemed like there was a little gap there for a while. But to your point, once you were able to start building your own form app interfaces and then Power Automate behind the scenes, so Filer came out first, which is your SharePoint plugin, and
Yeah.
then Flowr,
Yeah,
clearly,
then
and
Flowr came around. Yeah, and that's
right.
always been a cloud first product for Power Automate. I think we've had something in the region of 150 different actions now
Which are
to manage the
document
documents.
based, right? I mean, that's your real niche here, is that SharePoint, of course, stores documents, but there's this whole AI component. There's this whole interface that Microsoft is kind of getting into. Like, for instance, in Power Apps, you could do a PDF embedded viewer, but it's very glitchy. So document automation within the Power Platform is really where you guys focus.
Yeah, indeed. I suppose Power Apps was one of the first key products in the Power Platform to replace Access and InfoPath. And I remember 5 years or so having conversations around, InfoPath is dead. We need to migrate. People looking at alternative solutions. Nintex Forms and Workflow were, you know, probably one step ahead of Microsoft at the time. And then, Microsoft introduced Power Apps, and the rest is history. SharePoint Designer. I've built many systems and solutions using that. It had its pros and cons, and then Power Automate came along and really excelled the ability to integrate with different line of business systems. It was at that moment in time where everyone started moving to the cloud. It was a cloud first approach. The governments, the NHS trusts here in the UK, it was their mandate to move to the cloud. So it kind of just expedited the adoption of all of those technologies.
Interesting. I mean, clear, NHS is National Health System in the UK, largest employer, I think, in the world. And so, HIPAA data here in the US, which is personal healthcare information, they felt like, hey, SharePoint's secure enough, it's serverless, we're good with managing that level of confidential data in SharePoint, because I still have people, customers, we deal in 20 different verticals, and healthcare is one of them. Clearly, other areas like schools, they're still hesitant on the cloud. So, what do you think adding the level of security that Filer also adds help them justify that? Like, I mean, were there any concerns around security and compliance?
No, Filer is built on top of SharePoint, so we tie into all of the APIs and all of the security. We are providing effectively a functional component on top of that. So, providing the organization is happy with Microsoft 365 and it ticks all of the security compliance requirements for that organization, then there should really be no reason why you wouldn't use Filer in this example, because it's installed in your Office 365 environment. It's installed in your Azure tenant. We don't host it. It's all managed and governed by that organization.
That's
Um,
probably an easy conversation to have. I mean, listen, you're storing everything in Microsoft versus me, which I sell ECM systems that are bespoke, that are, from another vendor, and they have to actually take it out of something and put it in that, like DocStar, DocuWare, whatever.
yeah.
That's probably a much easier conversation to have, given that you have no purview into their tenant. so to
Yeah,
speak.
great. Yeah, it's in their SharePoint. All the data remains in their SharePoint and Microsoft 365 environment. It's not a SaaS offering. We do not tie into that. We don't pull information out. So yeah, it's a very highly secure platform. And obviously, in addition to the SharePoint permissions, you've got the rest of the Microsoft security suite, Purview, Priva,
So Microsoft
that sit on
Entra, like, what do you mean, like Entra, which used to be what, like Azure
Active
AD,
Directory.
or yeah?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, so
what
you're
other
using
what other
existing
security
credentials, you've got
things?
all your conditional access policies,
Okay,
multi-factor authentication. And then you've got, on top of your documents, you've got your compliance, retention, deletion, sensitivity labels, encryption. I mean, you can go right to the low level here where files that have been downloaded are still encrypted and require users to sign in, or, you can't print those documents. You can't copy and paste copy from those documents.
God, I didn't
So yeah,
realize you had all that capability. But the Microsoft ecosystem, as I'm finding, like archiving came up in one of our mutual customers' needs, requirements, and Microsoft Archive. Who knew? I didn't even know, but they seem to have all these gaps somewhat filled from that perspective, from the securities perspective, and you can enhance SharePoint with all these other Microsoft Azure based security tools.
yeah,
Are
indeed.
you
Yeah,
guys
it used to be where Microsoft would deliver 80%, and then the
right?
ISVs would come in and plug the 20%. And I think the Filer product, the Flowr product that we have, is that extra 20% that Microsoft doesn't provide, um,
And
which
it's a
is
lot of document based things, and the what Flowr, and I should probably explain. So Encodian Filer is essentially EDMS ECM on top of SharePoint. So things
yeah,
like document viewer, document manipulation, the ability to use metadata instead of foldering, to be able to handle more than the document library limits of 50,000 pages, and putting in things like, I know we're working on tabular data, and so all these different things that they don't support out of the box. That's what Filer is. And now Flowr is kind of like it's a Power Automate plugin that allows, it comes with 150 plus different predefined document specific workflow things. So like merging documents, turning in text searchable, things like that. And I wanted to make everybody known, and you certainly can go to encodian.com and check out their products. But you know uh, that is what those two products that we're talking about specifically do. Obviously, lots of use cases, and you're head of professional services, so you see lots of business requirements, and probably from a pre-sales perspective, hey, I wanted to do a certain thing. What are some of those unique projects like? I'm not talking about scan, index, retrieve type stuff, but what's something unique that you've done? I know you came out with this product called Chatr, not to bait you on that, but what are some things that you're seeing that are kind of neat that you had to kind of invent uh, recently in terms of a project?
yeah. So I suppose one of the more recent products that we've gone to market with is effectively our Chat GPT equivalent solution, or a Microsoft Copilot equivalent, and we've called it Chatr. Um, and it is a secure Chat GPT tool. So rather
It only
than
works with ChatGPT or OpenAI, or does it work with Copilot, or is
we use the Azure OpenAI
okay,
services.
good.
So it uses GPT 3.5 or 4.0, or any of the other AI models that are available to us. I think technically it is also possible to use the API call to other uh, AI models. We do have the ability to call an open AI model directly rather than using the Azure AI services, for example. I mean, and that kind of came around because one of our customers in a financial industry, highly sensitive information, their employees were using OpenAI's Chat GPT, and they didn't want that. everyone knows the information that you push into ChatGPT could end up in the large language model for
Model,
training.
right?
So effectively, we've built an Azure hosted solution inside the client's Azure tenant. It's got the web app. They can access it on a device. They can access it in Teams. They can access it on their mobile phone, and they get the same results. Effectively, we are asking for a prompt. We are responding with a description, a generative answer based on the same GPT models as ChatGPT. I mean, that was phase one for them. We've gone through that. We're now on phase two, where we're now indexing their Microsoft 365 content. So not only can they ask this tool,
Huh.
questions that relate to information that can be sourced from the internet, they can now query their mailbox. They can query
Through the
OneDrive. They can
Dataverse,
query
through all the
SharePoint.
different. Interesting. So you're basically using Gen AI to go through and tag or index
Yeah.
documents, and so I that's cool. But from a what does Chatter provide that Chat GPT doesn't provide? Is it that you're brokering that conversation so that the sensitive data doesn't get into the large Chat
Yeah, I mean, I
GPT's
think
large language
that's
model?
the big tick
Okay.
item. Having a secure in-house method of having that capabilities. I mean, we've got additional controls. There's auditing, monitoring in the background as well for the administrators. Should someone ask it to provide a response into an RFP, and it's got some financial figures, or it's got some factual information that actually the AI model has not got correct, and it ends up in a lawsuit. You could technically find out where that content came from. I mean, the other
Hmm.
advantage is, Microsoft Copilot does a lot of this as well. You can ask it to provide a response from the internet. You could ask it for a response from a SharePoint document. Tell me
Yeah,
about my
I had it build a logo for me the other
content.
day. And Chat GPT doesn't do that. Like, I know we're kind of going a right turn here, but what's kind of the difference between Copilot and OpenAI's Chat GPT? I clearly Copilot can look at the Dataverse and some other, but generically, is it using Copilot using Chat GPT?
It's using the AI models. So effectively, it's converting natural language into commands that is doing something behind the scenes. So, in Microsoft World, there's a co-pilot for every Microsoft product. So there's something like 170 co-pilots that Microsoft have.
Oh, why do they do that? Isn't it kind
Because
of too
I
disparate
mean,
to?
if you think about Power Apps and the Power Platform, you kind of want a co-pilot for Power Apps to help you create forms, tables,
So it's
views,
context,
screens. So it's
right?
context driven.
Right.
There's a
Interesting.
co-pilot for Power Automate, so it knows how to handle an if statement and logic and send an email and start an approval process.
It's kind of amazing. I had it build me a flow, and it was really accurate.
Oh,
It's
really?
kind of
That's good.
amazing.
Yeah,
Now,
I
again,
mean,
I was doing something
there's
simple.
lots of
I'm not doing kind of what you're doing, but yeah,
yeah,
I'm
I mean,
sure
there's
you
lots of
can't
success
rely on that.
stories out there. There's lots of things that it doesn't do that you would expect. But I mean, we're in the very early stages of AI. Everyone's talking about it. It's the era of AI, and I can only imagine in the next 18, 24 months that these products and capabilities is really going to mature to the point where you're not creating content by typing into the browser or into the Word document. You're interacting with these via the chatbots that does the bulk of it. Add me a table, format this, change these headings, change the font, all of that sort of stuff that you would do manually. And especially when it comes to low code development, being able to describe, create me a Power App, Power Automate, a chatbot, a Power Portal, or whatever it might be. I mean, these
That's
things
so
will
interesting.
at some
I'm
point
still the
come.
guy that I don't talk to text. I'm still the guy that physically texts. And I know like my kids don't ever do that. They talk like conversationally if they're
Yeah,
searching for something or doing a text. I guess I'm just old school like that, but I mean, I used a headshot photo AI photo editor the other day, and I'm like, "Hey, change my hair to gray, and it would do it, and it didn't look fake. It looked like so clean and
So
clear.
realistic.
It's unbelievable, and I assume that's like DAL E technology, right? Or to be
Yep.
able to, I
Yeah.
mean,
The
the
image AI
level of,
model.
right? I mean, are we going to be able to teleport soon? I mean, the level of generative AI, and everybody's in AI right now, but the kind of the uniqueness to it is kind of unbelievable.
I
Um,
think this is where I think V3 of our product will go, and this is where plugins come into play. It's not generating a response or some paragraphs or sentences based on existing content. It's interacting with those bots and it physically doing something. So, you know, in a document management world, you could be in your document management system and you could ask the system to, go and classify these documents. And off the back of that, it will pass it into the AI model. It will process it, it will classify it, it will extract that information. Or it might be that you ask it to go and validate if this purchase order number is correct. And in the background, that converts that natural language into a command to go and call the API for the finance system, passes in, the record that you're on. It knows contextually that you're on this supplier. So it goes and looks at all the invoices for that supplier and matches. Or it might be, split this document. There's a scanned batch of files here. I need to separate them into separate files. Go ahead and do it. And in fact, there is a nice demo from Microsoft that demonstrates that capability with Power Automate Desktop, where you can split files or send files for signatures. And that will all come naturally into document and records management solutions
yeah, I've heard
very soon.
ChatGPT do really well reading like invoices and stuff. I've heard it do that kind of stuff, but I've never
Yeah,
really tried that. I mean, clearly ChatGPT passed the US bar, which is to become an attorney here, which is not
yeah.
easy to do, right? I mean, what in terms of like where does this go? What does 5 years look like? What does 10 years look like? I mean, I know one the power electricity required to run these AI engines, but you know, eventually that large language model becomes so big, um, I would assume it's hard to manage. I'm sure they've come up with a way to handle that, but what do you? I mean, self-driving cars, I get that, but how is generative AI going to influence? Do you think there's no back office admin people anymore in neural
It's, I
models, and like what happens in
I
five
think it's an
years and 10
interesting
years?
one. I mean, this is the whole is AI going to replace my job type conversations that everyone gets worried about. And I mean, if you step back 6 years when the Power Platform came around, for example, everyone was worried. I can create forms really easily now. Access database creators, info path developers were all worried that Power Apps was going to take over their jobs because end users could create those, and it hasn't really. Or
Yeah,
automation, let's create RPA bots or cloud flows to do all this stuff that you're paying someone full time to sit there and process an accounts mailbox inbox, for example. I mean, yeah, there are cost savings to be had. There needs to be a return on investment of spending that amount of consultancy. But I think reality is it's not going to replace
replace
people. Okay,
jobs.
there'll be
But
efficiency.
I
Yeah, I
mean,
think
Aaron, I mean, it's 2007, the first iPhone came out, and then was it 20 OpenAI, whatever the first version was, like 28 and 19, something like. I mean, with in 15 years, less than 15 years, we went from our smartphone to generative AI. And now 10 years beyond here, like I can't even imagine what we're going to see. I know Microsoft just came out with their quantum computing algorithm or something like that. I, I
I guess
mean,
five
Microsoft.
years is a very, very long time, isn't it, in the world of AI? I guess
It is.
I
That's what
mean, people are probably
I'm.
just looking at, in a year or two's time. I mean, 5 years will be a significant advantage. with what we could do.
It's kind of unbelievable what we're seeing. Just I talk a lot about documents and intelligent document processing and just what we see now and the ability for, you know, auto separation based on contextual classification and extraction of line items of data and all sorts of crazy things that were never really possible before. And I see that. And so, you know, my question to you would be like, you see the DocuWares, the Docu whatevers, Documentums of the world and these ECM platforms, or even like Kofax. Like, if you were a single point solution like a Kofax or now Tungsten, but or an Abby, I mean, why, if I was a Microsoft platform user, like, why would I even want to go to an independent ISV? Not to say that Tungsten's small, but they're a couple hundred million, whatever. I mean, Microsoft is, they're the largest company in the world, right? I mean, you're not going to outpace them in innovation. Like, I mean, do you see that these other single point ISV solutions are even viable anymore?
I think there's so much functionality um, coming to Microsoft in the Microsoft tech stack, and pretty much every organization is using either Microsoft or Google, and Microsoft has
Yeah.
by far the larger market here. And the fact that you are already paying for that Microsoft license and all the security that comes with it, and you get a generous helping of document storage capabilities. I mean, it's going to be a very tough sell to for an organization to want to go with another partner to scan their documents or process their documents or store their documents. Microsoft has a very broad capability for document management, from the new AI capabilities that have been launched in the last 12 months, from ingesting that, scanning it, identifying it, recognizing
Is
it,
that
to storing it.
syntax? Is that what
And
they call
syntax,
syntax? Yeah.
yeah, well, SharePoint Premium now it's going to be renamed to.
Oh, okay. So
Um,
syntax is actually going to be SharePoint Premium.
Indeed, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
but then all the form recognizer capabilities that the Power Platform uses AI Builder, SharePoint uses Syntax or SharePoint Premium for forms recognition, and then you've got the Document Intelligence Center in Azure. So they're all fronted differently depending on the type of user that you are. So if you're in Power Platform and you're a Power Platform developer, you've got all that AI capabilities. And behind the scenes, it's effectively calling the same API. You
Yeah,
just have a
which is
different.
interesting because it's more expensive using the AI builder within Power Automate. It's like $1.60 versus $1 if you use it through Azure Document Intelligence, which I thought was because they do the AI builder credits, which I
Yep.
thought, and
Yeah.
it's like $500 for 5,000 credits, and then it's 32 credits per page. So I think that kind of messes it, but it's interesting to see the
I
different
mean, I think there's.
models.
I mean, there's the ability to create those solutions a lot quicker. So you're going to pay a premium for the AI
Because
credits that you use. And if you think
because it's
about,
embedded in the workflow versus having to make a call to it or
well,
yeah.
yeah, and I mean, it's obviously quicker to create an app and get it up and running. If you think about the opposite end of the scale with pro code or high code, they call it these days with Azure, you need to build the web front end. You've got to host a whole bunch of services and then call the AI model to process it. So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, whilst it's cheaper per page, the overall cost is probably not too different once you've factored in the other
Well, I mean,
resources
it's a
that are
fraction
running.
of the cost of others, like, a penny a page for pre-built. Abby charges 20 cents for that, right? I mean, so
Yeah.
theoretically they've democratized that space. So commercially, I just thought it was interesting as they've created a co-pilot for every app, pretty much they've now have AI in multiple ways you can consume that. It's very interesting. What
Yeah,
do you
I just think Microsoft is just a very flexible platform that allows you to, do a lot. And it's going to be a tough sell for, these other ISVs that have got dedicated apps where, Microsoft is slowly adding more and more functionality that is competing.
Yeah, I also think it's an enterprise play versus a single point solution departmental play. Like we usually sell into an accounts payable solution, but then it's stuck there. Like the user adoption's poor. But with a Teams integration, and if you're in Microsoft, you're always in Teams. I think the user adoption rates across the org are much better. Are you seeing that like in your deployments? It's usually an enterprise play, or is it still a departmental play?
I mean, for a Power Platform, it's very much a departmental play. I mean, we're no longer talking to IT managers, IT directors. You know, many years ago, consultancies were Exchange migrations, file migrations, infrastructure implementations, security, and we were talking to IT teams. Nowadays, we are talking to end users, to the business. Finance. The finance manager has a requirement to build solutions and automations. Um, we are talking to them, and that is across all industries, all sectors, all sizes. I mean, typically the records management side is more enterprise that we find. We work with healthcares, legal, engineering, housing associations. Typically for records management, just because of the nature of those organizations having, much more of a paper-based way of working. Um, but that said, every organization, regardless of size, still, from a finance perspective, receives invoices, purchase orders, has a finance system.
That's always why
Um,
we focus on procurement, right? Because everybody has it, and it's not unique to that particular industry. But
yeah,
that's interesting that you find that. I mean, clearly, if you're in NHS, right? I mean, the benefit is that they already own it, they already have it, and it's not like, oh, you need to go buy these many concurrent user licenses. Everybody already has it.
yeah,
So the
yeah,
interface
and
to
they've
view
got a
that
lot of storage as
information,
well.
right?
Um,
Interesting. So
but
I
yeah,
wanted to ask you because you're an MVP, a Microsoft MVP, and I remember the MCSE days when I used to take certifications and become I'm interested. Obviously, I'm not maybe not as technical as you, but wanted to kind of go down that. If you are someone new and you wanted to get in to this power platform and the ecosystem we have here, what does it take to become an MVP? Like I looked at some. Do you have to? It's multiple tests, right? And then you go to a specific Microsoft um, kind of training. Is that how it works, or is it like a general MVP?
um, I mean, they publish guidelines, but they never really tell you what they're scoring you on. So, in Microsoft Corp in Seattle, there are product teams and community leaders inside those product teams. I think the MVP program is very much for those that are one. You have to be technical. I mean, it's one of the conditions if you look on the website. So you
Hmm.
need to know your stuff. Um, the award is categorized by program. So you'll have Power Platform MVPs. You'll have Modern
Okay.
Work MVPs. You'll have Azure MVPs. And the best way to go down that route is to focus on a single area and become deep in that knowledge. The second part is, you need to share that knowledge outside of work. So anything that an MVP does as a contribution to that award is effectively out of hours. You don't get paid. Non-commercial engagements. So it's speaking at events. It's
So is
running
there
user
a,
groups.
so that's a requirement for MVP is that you like can not so much continue education, but showing in a public setting, you know, speaking engagement thing like that's actual part of it.
Yeah, yeah. So
Interesting.
it's effectively a community evangelism award, I suppose. So um, yeah, if anything that you get paid for cannot contribute towards your MVP. Um, you cannot be paid and have that count. So
Hmm.
it's going above and beyond, really. Outside of work hours, evenings, weekends, running events, conferences, speaking at engagements. It could be mentoring others.
Hmm.
Could be writing
Interesting.
blogs. It could be writing books.
You used to be able to just
Yeah.
take the test and be, certified. Now it's
Well, I mean, the
obviously.
MCSE and the MCTs is test driven, and anyone could go and take it. I mean, to be awarded an MVP, you have to be in the program. Typically, you've got to be contributing for a year or two before you even get nominated, and
Oh, you got to be nominated.
you can only get
Yeah.
nominated by another MVP or a Microsoft employee, and then you go through quite a lot of due diligence behind the scenes. And I
It's like
remember when I
becoming a
got nominated.
doctor. I think it'd be easier to be a doctor. It's like, credentialing of a doctor.
You Yeah, you can't ask. I mean, if you ask, then you're probably going to get put down the bottom of the list. But you just have to, contribute and hope that someone recognizes that contribution. I mean, when mine went in, it took 18 months for it to go through the system. So it's not a
God.
take a test, you pass, you're now an MVP. It's, there's only 3,000 of us globally.
Wow.
So it's a
That's
very
impressive.
niche market.
Interesting.
So yeah.
It's funny because we sell a lot of, ECM. We sell a product called DocStar, and we went into an organization. They already had SharePoint. They're full M365, and they took on our product for a single point solution. And I'm talking to the IT director, and they have no clue about the Power Platform. Why is it that this Power Platform is such a like hidden gem? Like, what is it? Are they not promoting it? Because I see they promote it, and there's other consultants. What is it? I mean, it's not that new. Why are people not getting the clue?
Um, I mean, you look at the charts, you look at the graphs. I mean, the adoption of the Power Platform has significantly increased over the last years. I think I mean, marketing is great, and it's marketed to IT people, techies. They can see it, they know the capabilities. Um, the business users that are the ones that actually drive our projects. They come to us. I've got this process. Can you help me? They don't follow the channels that we do. Rarely do they go to Microsoft events. They're probably not overly familiar with it. And I suppose the next challenge that I find is that, great, I can create a form, I can create a workflow. I don't see how that then relates to my work. So, for me, and I quote one of my friends and a fellow MVP, Chris Huntingford, that he calls the Power Platform digital Lego blocks. It's not like SharePoint where you've got a document library and upload a document, job done. It's not Windows Active Directory where you create a username and password and that's your authentication. It's not black and white. I mean, the Power Platform is a suite of tools that you can build pretty much what you want. And it takes that creativity and a bit of ideation and some, a playbook, a set of examples where you can present to the business and say, look, here you go. Here's to the finance manager, here's a bunch of example solutions that you could create for a financial department. From invoice scanning to automating accounts to generating documents automatically. And then when you show them that, that's when they go, oh, and the light bulb moment is, well, I can do this. And I've got this paper-based form that, these guys do their expenses and they email it in and I've got to manually upload it to the system. I've then got to attach the receipt. I've then got to send it for approval process via email. And I don't know if that approval's been approved. It's gone lost in the email system. If only I had a form someone filled in on their phone, submit it, goes into it, notifies the next person to review and approve it, moves it on to the next, process. It's that they're business users. They are
Yeah,
financial
you're probably right. It's
experts,
the
but
business
they're not
users, right?
they're technical.
Right. So the typical MSP that's a Microsoft, your Microsoft provider, they don't know a lot about it because they're doing the Entra, which is Azure AD, and they're dealing with the Azure, virtual machines and databases and all that kind of stuff. But they're not really getting, those business requirements around process improvement, right? And prior to the Power Platform, you would have to build, you'd have to use C# and build your own UI and then be able to code all that workflow, and now essentially you can build ad hoc apps with very quickly, and also with Copilot. Like Copilot can actually build you the app. So I think I haven't seen a platform that's so unified, that's basically has everything you need in one ecosystem. I don't know that there's anything really like it out there. Have you seen anything that kind of competes with this?
Not really. I mean, I've worked with Microsoft for 20 years, so I'm a little bit agnostic to to others. But I mean, I've done some work with Google, G Cloud, G Suite, and it's just not as feature rich. People are migrating away to Microsoft because of the capabilities that they have. I mean,
Yep.
don't get me wrong, there's some good stuff in Google G Suite. Microsoft Forms, for
We're a G
example, are
Suite,
good.
but it's nowhere near as. I mean, I use both, and we're mostly G Suite, but G Suite doesn't have anything other than your typical modern work. It doesn't. You could do a crappy form, but they don't have that power platform type capability.
No, they've got forms. I mean, their forms are pretty good in Google. I mean, compared to a
Yeah.
Microsoft form, but it's not a Power App that you can
Right.
then take it to the next level. I mean, Power Apps now you can publish as apps on the App Store. You can
Which I
download them
think
and
is
check them out.
fantastic. Now you could commercialize the development on an ecosystem. And I know you guys specifically are up on their app store, and you get like 1,200 downloads a month just
Yeah,
on
with
the
Flowr.
store
Yeah,
per day. And yeah, it's
it's
unbelievable.
I mean, the template library in Power Automate is the key for us. I mean, we have a very small marketing team, and only up until last year did we only then start really going out to conferences. And we employed a technical evangelist about a year ago to enhance our YouTube and social presence. I mean, prior to that, the success really has been inside Flow or Power Automate. You're trying to do something, the connector comes up as a recommendation. You click on it, you see our documentation. Yeah,
Is
that's
that
really
how
good.
it comes up? So Microsoft, you're trying to do like, hey, I want to insert a row in an Excel spreadsheet, and then Encodian will come up.
Yep, it'll come
And
up as a suggested
oh
action.
wow,
Is
that's so cool.
split PDF, merge PDF. We've got the e-sign capabilities. So you type in e-sign, it comes up with the two common, more popular ones, I suppose, and then us. So people come across us, organically. We don't have to have a
They make
large
it so
sales
easy for you
team.
to consume your stuff. Like, you know,
Yeah,
like old software. I mean, what we're doing today is we're calling people up. Hey, you want document management, AP automation, and it's so hard. Versus, I'm already in a project. I need something to fill this gap. Here, Microsoft, use this, and then you download it before you know. Oh, that worked. And
yeah.
then people want to try and buy, try before they buy, and that's interesting that how Microsoft's commercialized your adapters or your plugins, so to speak, into their platform and suggests that. I mean, that from a software guy who sells, that's pretty cool how they do that.
Yeah, and they're
I'm
pretty
sure
clever
all of them
about
do
it
it.
as well because, all of those resources are hosted in Azure. So not only are they increasing the user adoption for
Right.
the end user to create more flows, they're also commercializing the fact that we're paying Microsoft to host those APIs and the functionality in the back end.
So
So
that's how they get their money. That's how they
yeah,
make,
it's a double win-win for them. Yeah, it's very
interesting.
clever.
Aaron, I've really enjoyed our conversation. The whole Microsoft, just there, I want to learn so much more about it. There's just so much there. I mean, I could just be a Dataverse guy and literally probably couldn't even just understand everything that's in the Dataverse and what you can do with that, or Copilot for that matter. It's kind of amazing what Microsoft has done, and I think as a someone that self-actualizes, I want to become certified, and I think that MVP uh, accreditation is kind of unbelievable. So kudos to you for going through that painstaking process. Any parting words for us before we we end our session today?
Other than thank you very much for having me. Obviously, we are working on multiple enhancements to our Filer product, and from document recognition capabilities to classification.
Oh, so you are adding some of that in. Interesting.
Yeah, we've got triage center and effectively a digital mail room. So yeah, I
Oh,
mean, and with the enhancements in the AI models coming, further improvements, further models from Microsoft as well. I think, yeah, document management and records management in SharePoint, and this concept of when to use what, whether it's OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams, or a records management solution that complements your CRM, financial systems, ERPs. I mean, Microsoft and SharePoint and Syntax and SharePoint Premium is very much on the agenda for us as an organization, but also for Microsoft, the amount of investments going into that. I can only foresee that over the next few years, people moving more and more of those documents into their Microsoft 365 environment.
yeah, I see. We're at the kind of the press. You're not even starting to climb up that curve. Early adopters, I know as consultancy and system integrators, we're really focused now on this automation 3.0 with Microsoft. We see it, people have it. We're seeing less friction in the sales cycle. It's clearly the way to go.
Yeah,
I'm excited about what we're going to see with Encodian. So, anybody interested, Encodian.com. Thanks, Aaron, for joining today. I know you're across the pond in the UK, and it's about almost 5 there. So I'll let you go. Get on your bicycle, get to the beach, and again, thanks so much. Appreciate your time today.
brilliant. Cheers. Thank you very much for having me, Brent.
Cheers. Thanks, Aaron.
Cheers.
Bye.